So today we're going to be talking about the aftermath of the Supreme Court's decision to strike down the vaccine mandate. Now, if you don't know what this was, Joe Biden was trying to mandate that any company with over 100 employees would have to mandate that their employees all get the COVID-19 vaccination before they can continue to come into work. Or there is one little exemption: you could get a weekly COVID test, which would get quite expensive for an indefinite mandate. But it was struck down by the Supreme Court. They said, no, you can't do that. Other than in like the healthcare field, I think doctors and nurses and people working in hospitals still have to have it. But just employees in general, or companies in general with over 100 employees, do not have to. So Joe Biden decided to kind of try to get around that by reaching out to the states themselves, cities, and the companies, and say that it is their job on a local level or at their company's level to implement these vaccine mandates among their employees or among the people living in their cities and towns. And that we would need to all band together and do this locally since we couldn't get it done federally, which is the first time I think I've ever probably heard Joe Biden push for something being done at a local level and not at a federal level. And just to show you what I'm talking about, here's Jen Psaki basically explaining the statement from Joe Biden on that.
The Supreme Court's decision on the OSHA mandate essentially means that in this pandemic, it is up to individual employers to determine whether their workplaces will be safe for employees and whether their businesses will be safe for consumers. So President Biden, you'll see this in his statement, will be calling on and will continue to call on businesses to immediately join those who have already stepped up, including 1/3 of Fortune 100 companies, to institute vaccination requirements to protect their workers, customers, and communities. We have to keep working together in order to get this done to save more lives.
So we're going to talk about two companies that are reacting to this vaccine mandate situation from the Supreme Court. One company is keeping the vaccine mandate in place and requiring that all their employees have the vaccine, just like Joe Biden said. The other company is reversing the decision on it. They had initially implemented it when they heard that Biden was mandating this, and they are now deciding that, hey, they don't have to do it anymore. Two companies are Starbucks and Carhartt. Now, you might have initial thoughts as to which one would mandate a vaccine for their employees and which one would say, oh no, you don't have to have it. But your initial thoughts on which company is doing which might be wrong. So Starbucks is actually the one that's reversing their decision on the mandate. They initially put it in place January 3rd, and the employees were all going to have to be vaccinated by February 9th or have that COVID test like I was talking about. But when the Supreme Court decision came through, they said, okay, we're not going to mandate the vaccine anymore. In fact, most of our employees already got it. They didn't give a number, but they just said, hey, most of them already have it, so we're not mandating it. So if you work at Starbucks, don't have to get the vaccine anymore. But if you work at Carhartt, unfortunately, they are still mandating the vaccine. The reason given by the CEO, Mark Valadale, was, he said, we put workplace safety at the very top of our priority list, and the Supreme Court's recent ruling doesn't impact our core value. Notice something very interesting there. He said, we put workplace safety at the top of our priority list. This basically creates the assumption he's associating having the vaccine with creating a safe work environment. Now, if you take studies on how the efficacy of the vaccine, and if you look at what doctors are saying about the vaccine, workplace safety doesn't really line up with the features of it very much. So as to not get banned, I am not a doctor and I'm not giving any medical advice about the vaccine, and I'm not going to comment on what it can and can't do. But we will say that it is very important to look at research coming out about the vaccine and see what it can do in regards to, one, transmission and spreading the disease. Does it prevent that? Does it not? Go ahead and look into that. See if it helps with transmission at all. or much at all. You can look at how it affects symptoms, if you can still get it, if you still cannot get it, and then if those symptoms are worse or they can be lessened by it. And you should also look at if there are any adverse side effects to getting it. And I'm not talking about going on a conspiracy theory Facebook page where they say that it makes you grow 2 heads. I'm not talking about going to some random social media site. I'm talking about either you can ask your personal doctor, you can go look at medical journals, you can look at research that hospitals are putting out, whatever it may be. Look at an expert's opinion on this and see what they have to say about it. And then see if the phrase workplace safety goes along with having the vaccine. Does having it or not having it really affect the safety of everyone at the workplace? It is an important question to ask. It's something very important to look into. Again, I'm not saying whether it does or doesn't, but if you can go look at this information instead of just taking what you hear from someone on the news, someone on Facebook, from me on a podcast, from anyone, and just talk to a medical professional and then ask, hey, are there any medical professionals that are saying the opposite of this, and why are they saying that? Try to hear both sides and hear what's going on, and at least get some of the data to make a decision. Because then you might see that the phrasing things like this, where you associate workplace safety automatically with someone having the vaccine, can be problematic. And this isn't just this company, right? A lot of companies are doing this. They associate the idea of having the vaccine with being safe, and the idea of not having the vaccine as being dangerous. And they continue to associate those things, and they continue to say those things. And it just needs to be looked into to verify if those associations have any merit. So in response to this, given that Carhartt is a company that makes clothes for working class Americans that do a lot of hard labor-intensive jobs, needless to say, they received a lot of backlash from people who don't support vaccine mandates in those lifestyles that they're not necessarily all for vaccine mandates, right? So there's a lot of pushback and people aren't buying their products. Well, then you had a bunch of other people jump on board who were for vaccine mandates saying, oh, well, I'm going to buy Carhartt stuff all the time now. This isn't uncommon. We've seen this with soda companies, food companies, other retailers. If a company comes out and has anything that's slightly political in their decision making, which the vaccine mandates are, you have the people associated with that side that are maybe more adamant in their side's beliefs that either boycott or jump in and buy tons of product from those companies. This is leading to us having a lot more choices, I suppose, in the market, because then you have to have 2 versions of Carhartt, essentially. You have to have, Carhartt's, in this case, the Vaccine Mandate Pro store, or the Pro Vaccine Mandate store. You're then, those people who needed Carhartt clothes before are still going to need something similar, so they're going to go to a competitor, or a new company is going to pop up that supplies that line of clothing or that type of clothing. This kind of leads to dual economies, right? Down the road, you see even social media alternatives, right? You're getting these separate pockets of retailers and services based on political beliefs, because people are making their buying and purchasing decisions on the political beliefs of those providing those goods or services, as opposed to making their decisions on what they buy based on the product or service itself. Moving on from those stores, though, let's talk about Rise Bagel Company. Little company, maybe not so little, but their company up in Minneapolis, and they had to close their doors because Minneapolis put in a vaccine or test mandate policy for dine-in eating. Now, the company responded with a little phrase. They said, "All are welcome here at Rise." And it was to promote this mentality that it doesn't matter your race, religion, what you look like, or whether you're vaccinated or not. We want everybody. Just come in, eat. But that wasn't allowed unless they, put in the vaccine test mandate or getting COVID test before you come in. And they are now only open for takeout. So you have companies that are standing up to their local city governments that are trying to implement this, and they're giving a little bit of pushback. We also have issues with supply chains with the vaccine mandates. The U.S.-Canada border specifically, I know we've already seen a lot of issues with the shipping supply lines and stuff coming in from overseas getting backed up at the ports. But that's just one part of it now. Now we have the trucking industry in trouble. So essentially, before there was a vaccine mandate for U.S. drivers going into Canada. And that kind of messed up things a little bit, but you could still have Canada drivers that were unvaccinated going into the United States at the time. But then they did implement a vaccine mandate for Canada drivers who are unvaccinated coming into the U.S. So now unvaccinated drivers cannot go either way if they're from the other country. And obviously you have to be from one or the other if you're shipping stuff back and forth there. This led to a backup in the shipping lines for the supplies. You have approximately 12,000 truck drivers that, if they don't have the vaccine and aren't going to get it, are going to be not on the roads shipping stuff back and forth. I mean, you've got food, you've got all kinds of whatever goods people order online, or you've got car parts. They ship car parts from Canada. And it's going to put a strain on things that are already strained enough from other hindrances in the supply line. We're going to be talking about planes in the next segment and those being grounded too. That's going to add to this even further. So the mandates are being put in place under the assumption that they make everything safer. And again, you can check out all the medical information on whether that is medically safer or not. Meanwhile, they're not asking the other big question of safety. Is this safe for our economy? Are these good economic decisions that we're making with these mandates? All the while, any discussions about these vaccines are becoming polarized, and kind of alluded to this a little bit ago, that it's not something new. This has been going on since vaccines were pretty much announced, right? People are very polarized on the subject, and it's getting more so. If you're on one side and someone else doesn't want to get the vaccine, you may call them an anti-vaxxer. If you're on the side where you don't want to get it, might be furious with the people who are trying to force you to, right? But the discussion's not given light of day. It's being shut down before it gets out. It's important to hear the case for getting it and the case for not getting it so that you can make a good educated decision. Anything else that comes out in the medical field, whatever drug or procedure it may be, if it's advertised or promoted, it always mentions going to talk to your doctor. It always mentions check with a doctor. Get an expert to give you their opinion on if you should or should not take this, do this, whatever it may be. You're not just supposed to take your government's word for it, or then a local news host or someone on a late night anchor telling you what to do, or a celebrity for that matter. So if the discussions were allowed to be had and given the light of day, maybe people could make better decisions on these things. For instance, it would be nice if they could talk about reinfection, people who've already had COVID. Is it beneficial for them to get the vaccine? Is it not? I don't know. Well, Cleveland Clinic did a study on this and put out some results. What are the results? I haven't heard about it anywhere. It'd be nice to hear somewhere other than having to go online and find this. buried somewhere, right? Also, it should be worth talking about the symptoms that people are having from the vaccine. Is it causing any negative effects in anyone? Is it causing negative effects in one specific population more than others? Is it young men, young women, old men, old women? Like, who's is it causing problems in any of them? If so, what kind of problems? Does it have to do with the heart? I don't know. Look at the studies from the CDC. What are they saying? Is it a lot of people? Is it a little bit of people? If it's some people, should you have the decision to make the choice whether or not you get it if you're in the group that's most affected by it? Or, well, anyone should, right? It's worth talking about. I think a lot of it, though, comes down to what was promised with the vaccine and then what happened with decisions people made after that. So it was almost promised as like a magic bullet or something that was going to completely save us from a pandemic that had very different reactions from different people in the first place. Again, some people were very, very afraid. Some people didn't think it was that bad. There was mixed reactions to it. But for the people that were very, very afraid, they heard about the vaccine coming out and the initial promises on it and what it was going to do. Maybe I shouldn't say promises, but the initial predictions on what it was going to do did not necessarily match up with how it's working right now. Again, not getting into specifics because I'm not going to get kicked off for something like this, but look into it. Is what they said it's going to do what it's doing right now? A lot of people don't think it is. And this can lead to some problems with how the people who got the vaccine feel about it. So there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy. And essentially what it is let's say there's maybe like something you put a lot of money into. It can be a product, or it can be something you're going to go to, some type of event, right? Let's say it's an event. You paid to go to some event, a concert, a trip, or whatever it may be, and you've sunk a lot of money into it. But some problems arise, maybe in your family, your health, or whatever it may be, and it's going to be really complicated to go to this event. And it actually might be more detrimental to you overall to go, but you've already sunk so much money into it that you feel like you need to go anyway. So you do. But that was actually the worst decision, right? You've already invested so much in it, you feel like you have to with your money. Or, you're walking down a path and it splits and you are supposed to go where you need to go is to the right, but you end up going to the left and you realize you've gone the wrong way about halfway down this path. But then instead of making the smart decision and turning around and going the other way back to the fork and then your correct direction, you're stubborn and you just keep on trucking down the path you were going. I'm getting similar vibes from people who jumped on and got the vaccine right away. And not everyone. I'm not categorizing everyone who got it into this category. But the people who are going out there being very belligerent and trying to force other people to get vaccinated and are very, rude about it and also aggressive and almost condescending. Looking at you late night hosts that think comedy is making fun of people who don't want to get it. But yeah, there's this weird hatred almost. At least it seems like hatred. But maybe in reality, it's just the people who got it, it's their human nature, right? And when I say that, I mean self-conceit or pride. That idea that, oh man, I made a decision I'm not necessarily happy with, but we know people can't admit they're wrong and hate to admit they're wrong. It's a natural thing that's in every single person. So they're not likely to admit they're wrong. So then, like I said, it's that double down. I got to double down on what I was doing. And so that push for everyone else to get it becomes even more because I want you to be in the same boat as me. So if I had to get it, you have to get it. Because it's not working like I thought, but you should have got it anyway, kind of mentality. That's not to say everyone is. That's just a little 2 cents here at the end of the news on maybe why a lot of people are acting the the way they are with regards to the idea of mandating the vaccine, because we could be having a civil discussion on it, and we could be saying, oh, you know what, it really worked for this person, this person, this person in these scenarios. You know, it seemed like it was really helpful and was beneficial to them. Or you could say, well, yeah, but then there were these people and they had these really bad reactions and it wasn't helpful at all. Well, it might be nice to know about all those cases and discuss them, and then just be like, you know what, it's worth it, it's not worth it. But God forbid we're able to make our own decisions nowadays, because I guess we're all children that need our hand held. Anyway, that's enough for the first segment. We're going to be moving on to a story about how 5G has grounded some airplanes. And no, it's not some crazy conspiracy theory. It's an argument between the basically telephone companies and the airline industry. And we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so for this segment, we're going to be talking about how 5G has grounded some planes. As I said in the last segment, we're going to be talking about how the telephone companies and the airlines are arguing over whether 5G is actually interfering with the comms and navigation of the airplanes, resulting in them having to ground certain models of airplanes and not be able to use them because of the proximity of the 5G C-band towers to the airport. We'll start with the Airlines for America. They sent a letter to the director of the NEC, the Transportation Secretary, the FAA Administrator, and the FCC Chairwoman. In it, they address all their concerns. I'm going to go ahead and read it to you here. They say, despite the recent collaboration and data sharing between the telecommunications industry, the Federal Aviation Administration, and the aviation industry, commercial aviation in the United States is facing major disruption of the traveling and shipping public based on our evaluation of the data and discussions that have been ongoing to resolve the issue of how to best deploy 5G C-band in a safe manner around the U.S. airports. We are writing with urgency to request that 5G be implemented everywhere in the country except within the approximate 2 miles of airport runways at affected airports as defined by the FAA on January 19, 2022. This will allow 5G to be deployed while avoiding harmful impacts on the aviation industry, the traveling public, supply chain, vaccine distribution, our workforce, and broader economy. We further ask that the FAA immediately identify those base stations closest to the key airport runways that need to be addressed to ensure the safety and avoid disruption in a manner that is narrowly focused and consistent with the agreement established on January 3, 2022. Immediate intervention is needed to avoid significant operational disruption to air passengers, shippers, supply chain, and delivery of needed medical supplies. The harm that will result from deployment on January 19th is substantially worse than we originally anticipated for two key reasons. First, we understand that most of the 50 large airports that we identified by the FAA for relief will still be subject to flight restrictions on January 19th. The FAA statement yesterday minimizes the fact that they are not granting relief to airports that are used by most of the traveling and shipping public. Unless our major hubs are cleared to fly, the vast majority of the traveling and shipping public will essentially be grounded. This means that on a day like yesterday, more than 1,100 flights and 100,000 passengers would be subjected to cancellations, diversions, or delays. Second, flight restrictions will no longer be limited to poor weather operations because radio altimeters provide critical information to other safety navigation systems in moderate airplanes. Multiple modem safety systems, aircraft will be deemed unusable, causing a much larger problem than what we knew on January 5th, 2022. Airplane manufacturers have informed us that there are huge swaths of the operating fleet that may need to be indefinitely grounded. In addition to the chaos caused domestically, the lack of usable wide-body aircraft could potentially strand tens of thousands of Americans overseas. The ripple effects across both passenger and cargo operations, our workforce, and the broader economy are simply incalculable. Every one of the passengers and cargo carriers will be struggling to get people shipments and the planes and crews wherever they need to be. To be blunt, the nation's commerce will grind to a halt. Given the short time frame and the exigency of this completely avoidable economic calamity, we respectfully request that you support and take whatever action necessary to ensure that 5G deployed that 5G is deployed except when towers are too close to the airport runways until the FAA can determine how that can be safely accomplished without catastrophic disruption. We stand ready and eager to continue our work with the U.S. government and mobile wireless providers. Okay, they say and then they all signed it there. They're talking about they're going to work with them to fix this. So essentially, I know that was a long letter. What the airlines from all these different airline companies are saying is that there's a few towers that are too close to the airports and it's grounding all their planes. Now, the reason, I'll talk about more the story with the airports and the phone companies in a second, but their premise here is that if this isn't fixed, it's going to add to all the supply chain issues that we just talked about in the last segment with the trucking and the shipping, and all of this is going to compound, and flights are already being canceled, right? There are not enough pilots coming in, whatever the other issues are going on, there's flights being canceled all over the country all the time. I've had the experience multiple times personally, and know people that have. It's not pretty at the airports right now. And this, on top of it, them saying they're going to have to ground all these extras, is going to add to the issues. Now, the wireless communication industry disputes the claims that the airports just made. In their response, or this is a spokesperson for someone associated with these industries, essentially. She says, this January, America's wireless providers will begin using a set of radio waves known as C-band spectrum to expand their 5G service to communities large and small across America. This exciting development is the foundation for innovations such as driverless cars and remote healthcare that will transform the way we live and work. But the truth is, we're playing catch-up. C-band spectrum is already the backbone of 5G networks around the world because it offers unique ability to provide high speeds over a wide coverage area, making sure no one gets left out of the new 5G economy. Nearly 40 countries are already using this spectrum. Recently, the aviation industry and the Federal Aviation Administration have suggested we should delay the launch of 5G in the C-band, a delay that will cause real harm. Pushing deployment 1 year would subtract $50 billion in economic growth, just as our nation recovers and rebuilds from the pandemic. It would leave us further behind dozens of other countries already using this spectrum, harming our country's global competitiveness, and would be severely limit our ability to ensure all Americans have access to high-speed mobile broadband, just as our nation prepares to invest billions to build broadband infrastructure. Fortunately, there appears to be no valid scientific or engineering basis to justify a delay, and there's overwhelming evidence to support a rapid deployment. So she goes on throughout here. I don't need to read you another whole letter. They go back and forth, essentially disputing each other's claims, saying there's no evidence for each other's claims. The phone company is saying that the airplanes aren't going to be affected by this technology. The airplanes are saying that their stuff's going to be disrupted, and it's expert against expert. I don't know, I guess, and it's about a rapid deployment, right? So it's not like they have forever to sit and talk about this. You got planes sitting on the ground. You've got 5G not being deployed. Each group is obviously looking out for their own business interests in reality, right? Like the phone company is going to make money off 5G being rapidly deployed. AT&T and Verizon, they're going to make money off that. The airlines are going to make money if their planes take off, and they're going to lose money if their planes don't take off. So both sides are fighting for their business to continue here, right? And each one's saying the other is in their way. Meanwhile, they don't allude to that. They don't say, oh, we're missing out on a bunch of money because people aren't going to care as much. So what they then do is say, this is going to affect the economy in this way, and it's bad for people, and people will be hurt because our company can't do this. And that may have some degree of truth, right? Like if planes are grounded, they're not going to be able to go places. Or maybe some businesses are going to be put on hold that will heavily utilize 5G, especially in like the medical field or whatever it may be they were saying there. So there's, cons to both things being held back. But I find it interesting just that both of these companies frame it in that way right away so that we know how urgent it is, because all the little people need help, right? We all need help while they're just looking out for us, and they need to get their systems implemented for our benefit. But that pretty much is the story about the airplanes right now. We'll come out with more on that later. Just wanted to point out how it seems like everything's just getting delayed, like the shipping lines, flight travel, shipping over planes, through trucks, overseas. If 5G is delayed, that's going to delay another whole industry, they're saying. So it doesn't seem like we're getting anywhere, does it, with all the problems and arguments we're having? But that does it for all of today's segments. Thank you guys for tuning in. We will see you next time. Thanks for checking out that episode of Staying Afloat. Remember, we can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And if you like the video version of the podcast, be sure to either check us out on YouTube or Spotify, because both places now have the video version. Again, that comes with more stuff that you can see. I put up visuals on the screen. But if you're only able to listen to it, then you can use any of those platforms as well. Also, if you want just short segments, you can go to YouTube and check out Staying Afloat Clips, and it's just bits and pieces of the show if you don't have time to listen to the whole thing. And lastly, if written articles are your thing, you can check me out at stayingafloat.substack.com. Post articles there on a regular basis. Be sure to check them out. Thanks, guys.